Hello and welcome to our YouTube channel, where we explore the fascinating history of Consolação Cemetery in São Paulo, Brazil. In this video, we will take you on a journey through time to discover the legends and stories behind this iconic cemetery. History: Consolação Cemetery has a rich and complex history that dates back to its founding in 1858. At the time, it was located outside the city limits and was designed as a burial ground for the elite. Over the years, the cemetery expanded and became a final resting place for people from all walks of life. Today, it is one of the most famous cemeteries in Brazil and is known for its beautiful architecture and impressive mausoleums. But Consolação Cemetery is more than just a burial ground. It is a reflection of the cultural and social changes that have taken place in Brazil over the past century and a half. Consolação Cemetery has undergone several expansions over the years to accommodate the increasing demand for burial plots in São Paulo. The first expansion took place in the late 1800s, when a new section of the cemetery was added to the south. This section was designated for the burial of Catholic priests and nuns, and it was named the Priests' Cemetery. In the early 1900s, another expansion took place to the north of the original cemetery. This section was initially reserved for the burial of non-Catholic foreigners, but it was later opened up to people from all religions and backgrounds. As the city continued to grow, the demand for burial plots increased, and the cemetery expanded once again in the 1930s. This time, a new section was added to the east, which was specifically designated for the burial of soldiers and veterans. In the 1950s, the cemetery underwent a major renovation, which included the construction of new roads and walkways, as well as the installation of new lighting and drainage systems. During this time, the cemetery also began to be used as a final resting place for people from all walks of life, regardless of their social status or religion. Today, Consolação Cemetery is one of the largest and most diverse cemeteries in São Paulo. It is home to the graves of people from all backgrounds and walks of life, including politicians, artists, musicians, and everyday citizens. The cemetery remains an important cultural landmark in the city, and it is a testament to the rich and diverse history of São Paulo and Brazil as a whole. Consolação Cemetery is known for its diverse and ornate architecture, with mausoleums and monuments that reflect the changing styles and tastes of different eras. One of the most common styles of mausoleums found in Consolação Cemetery is the neoclassical style, which was popular during the late 19th and early 20th centuries. These mausoleums are characterized by their grand columns, pediments, and other classical elements, which give them a sense of grandeur and permanence. Another popular style of mausoleum in Consolação Cemetery is the Art Deco style, which became popular in the 1920s and 1930s. These mausoleums are often characterized by their geometric shapes, streamlined designs, and use of modern materials like concrete and steel. In addition to these styles, there are also many mausoleums and monuments in Consolação Cemetery that reflect more individual and unique tastes. For example, some mausoleums are designed to look like small houses, with peaked roofs and ornate details. Others are decorated with intricate mosaics, stained glass, or other artistic elements. As the cemetery has expanded and evolved over time, new styles and trends have emerged in the design of mausoleums and monuments. Today, there are many examples of contemporary styles in the cemetery, including minimalist designs and more experimental forms. Overall, the architecture of Consolação Cemetery reflects the changing styles and tastes of different eras, as well as the individual personalities and values of the families who commissioned these structures. The diversity of architectural styles in the cemetery makes it a fascinating and unique place to explore, and it offers a window into the history and culture of São Paulo and Brazil as a whole. Consolação Cemetery is the final resting place of many notable figures from the history of São Paulo and Brazil. Here are some of the most prominent individuals buried in the cemetery. Mário de Andrade, one of the most important writers and cultural figures in Brazilian history, Andrade is buried in a simple grave in Consolação Cemetery. Oswald de Andrade, another influential writer and cultural figure. Oswald de Andrade is buried in a neoclassical mausoleum in the cemetery. Tarsila do Amaral, a pioneering modernist artist and close friend of both Mário and Oswald de Andrade, Amaral is buried in a distinctive modernist mausoleum in the cemetery. Julio Prestes, a former governor of São Paulo and presidential candidate, Prestes is buried in a grand neoclassical mausoleum in the cemetery. Francisco Matarazzo, one of the wealthiest and most powerful industrialists in Brazil during the early 20th century, Matarazzo is buried in a lavish neoclassical mausoleum in the cemetery. Monteiro Lobato, a beloved children's author and cultural icon, Lobato is buried in a simple grave in Consolação Cemetery. Ibrahim Nobra, a physician and activist who founded the Brazilian Center for the Study of Health, Nobra is buried in a unique mausoleum that resembles a miniature version of a hospital. Paulo Freire, a renowned educator and philosopher, Freire is buried in a simple grave in Consolação Cemetery. These are just a few of the many notable figures buried in Consolação Cemetery. Other notable individuals buried in the cemetery include musicians, artists, politicians, and everyday citizens who played important roles in the history and culture of São Paulo and Brazil. Consolação Cemetery is an important cultural landmark in São Paulo and Brazil for several reasons. Firstly, it is the final resting place of many notable figures from the history of São Paulo and Brazil, including writers, artists, politicians, and other influential figures. This makes the cemetery a unique site of cultural heritage, as it provides a physical link to the past and the individuals who helped shape the culture and history of the region and the country. Additionally, the architecture and artistry of the mausoleums and monuments in the cemetery reflect the changing styles and tastes of different eras, providing a visual history of São Paulo and Brazil. The cemetery's grounds are also home to a variety of sculptures and other works of art, many of which are of significant cultural value. Beyond its cultural significance, Consolação Cemetery is also a popular destination for both locals and tourists. Many people visit the cemetery to pay their respects to loved ones who are buried there, while others come to appreciate the history and artistry of the cemetery itself. The cemetery is also a popular spot for guided tours and photography, as the unique mausoleums and monuments provide a visually striking backdrop for photos. Overall, Consolação Cemetery is an important cultural landmark in São Paulo and Brazil due to its historical significance, architectural and artistic value, and its popularity as a destination for both locals and tourists. It is a site that helps to preserve and showcase the culture and history of São Paulo and Brazil, and will continue to be an important part of the region's heritage for generations to come. Consolacao Cemetery is steeped in legends and folklore, adding to its mystique and allure. Two of the most famous tales associated with the cemetery are those of the Dama de Madrugada and the Buried Alive Man. The legend of the Dama de Madrugada, or Lady of the Dawn, tells the story of a woman who roams the cemetery at night, dressed in a white dress and holding a bouquet of flowers. According to the legend, she is the ghost of a woman who died tragically and now wanders the cemetery in search of her lost love. Many people claim to have seen her, adding to the mystique and mystery of the cemetery. Another famous legend associated with Consolação Cemetery is that of the Buried Alive Man. According to the legend, a man was mistakenly buried alive in the cemetery, and when his family discovered their mistake, they exhumed his coffin to find him alive and scratching at the lid of his coffin. The story has been retold many times over the years, adding to the eerie and spooky atmosphere of the cemetery. These legends and folklore contribute to the mystique and intrigue of Consolação Cemetery, making it an even more fascinating place to visit. Visitors can explore the cemetery's rich history and architecture, while also keeping an eye out for any signs of the Dama de Madrugada or the Buried Alive Man. Whether or not the tales are true, they add to the unique cultural significance of the cemetery, making it an unforgettable experience for visitors. Aside from the legends of the Dama de Madrugada and the Buried Alive Man, there are several other fascinating tales and folklore associated with Consolação Cemetery. One such legend tells of a statue of an angel that is said to weep tears of blood. According to the story, the angel was erected in memory of a young woman who died tragically, and ever since, visitors claim to have seen tears of blood streaming down its face. Another legend tells of a ghostly carriage that is said to roam the cemetery at night. The carriage is said to be pulled by a team of spectral horses and is driven by the ghost of a coachman. Visitors have reported hearing the sound of hooves and the creaking of wheels, adding to the eerie atmosphere of the cemetery. One more legend tells of a tomb that is said to be cursed. According to the tale, anyone who dares to touch the tomb will be struck with bad luck and misfortune. The tomb is said to belong to a wealthy man who made his fortune through illicit means, and his spirit is said to haunt the area, bringing misfortune to anyone who crosses his path. These tales and legends are just a few examples of the rich folklore and history that surrounds Consolação Cemetery. Whether or not these stories are true, they add to the unique cultural significance of the cemetery, making it a fascinating and intriguing destination for locals and tourists alike. Consolação Cemetery is not only a resting place for the deceased, but it is also a reflection of the social and cultural changes that have taken place in Brazil over the past century and a half. Initially designed as a final resting place for the wealthy elite, the cemetery evolved over time to become a place where people from all walks of life could be buried, reflecting the changing social dynamics in Brazil. The mausoleums and monuments found within the cemetery also reflect the changing tastes and styles of different eras, showcasing the influence of various architectural movements on Brazilian culture. In addition to its historical and cultural significance, Consolação Cemetery is an important part of São Paulo's cultural heritage. As such, there are ongoing efforts to preserve the cemetery and its heritage. The city government has implemented measures to prevent damage to the cemetery, including placing restrictions on new construction projects near the cemetery and increasing security measures to prevent vandalism and theft. Additionally, there are several preservation groups and organizations that work to raise awareness of the cemetery's cultural importance and advocate for its continued preservation. In recent years, there has been a renewed interest in preserving Consolacao Cemetery and other historic cemeteries in Brazil. This interest is fueled by a growing appreciation for Brazil's cultural heritage and a desire to ensure that these important cultural landmarks are preserved for future generations to enjoy. As a result, there are ongoing efforts to increase public awareness of the importance of cemetery preservation, and to encourage more people to get involved in the preservation efforts. In conclusion, Consolação Cemetery is not just a final resting place for the deceased, but a reflection of Brazil's rich cultural heritage and a testament to the changing social dynamics of the country. Its preservation is vital to preserving Brazil's history and cultural legacy for future generations. The ongoing efforts to protect and preserve the cemetery serve as a reminder of the importance of preserving our cultural heritage, and the role that cemeteries can play in this endeavor. Thank you for watching, and don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more amazing stories and legends from around the world.